Hi. It's Saturday and you're welcome to my public journal. So today I set off to deploy the API to render, like deploy it on render for testing. So that's not like the ideal place that I'm going to host it, but at least I'm not paying for hosting it right now, just for testing purposes. I want to deploy it to render. So that's what I've been working on, and I've been here for the past, what's the time now? It's now 9:33, so close to 2 hours. I've been here close to 2 hours. I'm currently in the library and still not working. The same TypeScript issues that I am facing, I've tried fixing a lot of them. So yeah, for those of you who would ever want to deploy anything to render, one trick that I found, like initially when I started, it wasn't working, but then what I actually picked up is the fact that I wish I could even show you on my screen, but on render you're supposed to set, we have some settings. Oh no, you wouldn't really see it, but down here there are settings that you need to make, and as part of the settings there is the build command, right? Yeah, so there is the build command, and technically if we are talking about the build command, what you put in there would be, let's say I'm using npm for building, so I'll just put npm run build and that should work. But I tried it a couple of times and I realized that the problem was all the npm packages, all the dependencies that I had were not being installed. So I was wondering why they were not being installed, because I figured by default everyone will want to, once you have such a project, if you're going to deploy it, it will automatically run the npm install to install the various dependencies before running the build command. But it turns out that render does not automatically run that npm install, so your dependencies are not installed. Once they are not installed, your build is not going to succeed. So that is what I had to change. So if you look at my build command, that is, if you can see, and I have npm install and npm run build. This means that when it gets to the build stage, the first command that I have is to run the install. So it's going to install all the dependencies before it tries running the build, and that is supposed to work. But currently the problem that I'm having, which I can see here, is that, let's go to the deploy logs. So it's referring to not finding some particular model that I have created for my models. The user model, it says it cannot find the user model or its corresponding type definitions, but I'm really sure it is there. So one particular thing, I've been trying to chat with ChatGPT to understand what could potentially be wrong, and one thing that I picked up from ChatGPT is that it could be that because I'm on a Windows machine, my Windows allows both, it's case insensitive, but if you go to a Unix environment like Linux, which is the type of environment that render uses, it is case sensitive. So if I mistakenly interchange the cases, then it's not going to be working on render. But I've looked through the code base and I am consistently using the same case, and I'm using upper cases. I don't know if I should convert everything to lowercase to see if that works. Maybe I should try that. But as it stands now, everything is fine. I ran the build locally and it works, even with verbose like giving me output of the build. I don't have any such issues. So right now my thesis is that the difference is in terms of the environment in which I'm running them. Like on render they are running it in a Linux environment, but on my local I'm running it in a Windows environment. So ideally we should get the same output, but because of the difference in environment, maybe that is contributing to the problem. So I look forward to probably testing it in a Linux environment as well. I could easily pop up an AWS VM to try it out to see if that is going to work. If that works, then I know that the problem is with render. But yeah, I'm still trying to debug it, and I'll keep you posted. I was finally able to fix the problem, and now the site is deployed successfully on render, and very soon I'm going to start looking at how to integrate the CLI tool into it, especially with the authentication service that I built. But now let me show you exactly what I meant by the build command. So when you come to settings in here, when you scroll down, you'd find build. So the build command over here. So you see that what I've provided is npm install and npm run build. So initially when I saw the build command, all that I could think about was the npm run build, because that is what is used for building. But now, just for you all to note, if you are ever deploying something to render, you'd have to know that by default render doesn't install your dependencies for you. So you have to add that command to your build command. The other thing that I found was the problem was, as I explained to you earlier, I presumed that it was a difference in the environment where I was using Windows and the environment where I'm deploying it to is a Linux environment. So as I was literally recording the first video, I mentioned that the model, how I've labeled the model, I've capitalized their names. So user had capital U, and I presume that that could be the reason why I was having that problem. So all I did was to change that to this lowercase u, and just by changing to lowercase u, the problem vanished, and now the build went through successfully. After that, it was left with deploying, and it wasn't deploying. There was another error. The error was that the Mongoose or MongoDB connection string is not, like, it expected a string but it's getting undefined. And it didn't make sense to me, because when I build locally and I run it locally, everything works. So I was wondering why that was the problem. Eventually, I tried playing around with the local by running some console logs to see exactly the output, and I realized the mistake that in my config file I was calling the environment variable mongodb underscore URI, but in my environment, there's the .env file, I named it mongo underscore URI, so there was no db. So that mismatch was what was causing the problem on the production side, or the one that I was deploying to render. But it's funny because locally it was still running. So I guess I've not even looked into it, but my guess is that because I'm using two different things. You remember I told you about the original code base for code snippets, and now I also built the code base for the authentication service, and I'm integrating it. So there are certain things that I didn't do it here, I did it there. And when I brought it in here, I had to make some changes, but I didn't pay attention to them. And that is what is biting me right now. But fortunately, I've been able to fix it. So now the API has been successfully deployed on render, and my next plan is to now look at how can I integrate the CLI tool that I built into this, because I've made a couple of changes in terms of the structure or the model for the snippet itself. Like I mentioned in the previous video, now I've introduced hash IDs I've introduced slacks. Those are things to make it easily identifiable. And I've introduced a couple of other things into the snippets model. So that means that I need to go back to the CLI tool and refine that code base as well. But more importantly, I want such that if you are trying to use the CLI tool to access something, like for instance, you want to create a snippet, but you want to create it using the CLI tool, I want you to first authenticate with it. So we already have the authentication service. That means that you should be logged in to be able to create a snippet via your command line. And that is one of the key things I want to look into. Hopefully I'll start looking into that tomorrow. But I'm really excited that I've been able to deploy this successfully. And thank you all so much for your support. Those of you who keep reaching out to me to appreciate my effort, thank you so much. And also, if you are new here and you like this sort of series, you want to see more of it, please go ahead and motivate me by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and also leaving a comment down below. Thank you, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.